Morning, everyone. I can see lots of people joining. I'll give everybody a moment before we kick off. Lovely. I can see the attendee list going up. Everyone's made it here. That's good to see. I'll just give it one more second before we kick off, give everybody a chance to join. Okay, I'm going to get started so that we're not losing any time. I'm sure more people will join as we get going. So welcome everybody to today's training session on finding and accessing health data for research. It's really lovely to see lots of you here today. So my name's Hannah and I am the forum coordinator at the NCRI. So I look after our early career researcher forum, of which of course you're all members. And we're also joined today by the team at HDR UK and of course our guest speakers as well. I'm sure you're looking forward to hearing from all of them. So we've been really looking forward to delivering today's session. So thank you very much for signing up. Before I go any further, I'm just going to do one or two housekeeping points, if that's okay. So just let you know that today's session will be recorded, so you'll be able to access it later. And we'd encourage you to use the Q&A function as well, which should be at the bottom of your screen. So please do pop questions in throughout the morning, and we will be able to pick those up and bring them into our Q&A sections in the agenda. So plenty of time to get through our questions. So, as some of you may know, the NCRI ECR Forum launched in June last year, and we've since grown to just over 565 members. And this particular area, so health data and accessing health data, is an area in which our ECRs really express a need for more training and more understanding. So that's why we're really happy to be here working with HDR UK to deliver this to you all this morning. We've got a brilliant array of speakers with us today. We're really lucky to have some great talks on the way. So you'll be hearing lots in just a moment. But before I hand over to our first speaker, we're actually going to kick off with a poll, if that's okay, because we wanted to understand a little bit more about the level of understanding in the room and what your thoughts are on health data at the moment and where you're at. So there should be a poll that will pop up on the screen, I'm hoping, in a moment. There we go. So a couple of questions. If you could pop some answers in there for us, I'll give everybody a moment. What we're going to do is we're going to revisit this poll at the end, and hopefully you'll have learned a little bit this morning, so that those answers might be slightly different when we come back to them later. I'll just give you all one more second to complete that before we move on. Lovely. So hopefully everybody has almost completed. Great stuff. Okay, so bang on 10:05, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker. So I'm going to hand over to Geoff Hall from DataCan.
Thanks very much, Hannah, and thanks to all of the people who've organised this meeting for inviting me to talk. It's great to talk to you all. And as somebody who is a grey-haired and perhaps approaching the final years of a career, it's lovely to speak to the early careers people who can carry the baton forward. So I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to share some slides with you. So let's see how we get on. How's that doing?
Yep, I think we can all see those now. Thanks.
Perfect. So I am a medical oncologist at the Leeds Cancer Centre, but I have two other roles within HDR UK. So first of all, I'm the Chief Clinical Data Officer, working with the central team, and I'm also the clinical lead and most recently the director of DataCan. And DataCan is a health data research UK hub that focuses specifically on cancer data. So much, to be honest, everything I talk to you about today is going to be focused on cancer data. So as a medical oncologist, I've spent my professional life working with clinical trials, recruiting patients wherever possible to clinical trials. So why am I talking to you today about real world evidence and routine healthcare data? And I guess that my starting position is this, that clinical trials are a fabulous way to collect perfect data. But it's perfect data on a deeply imperfect population. So we all know that only a small minority of patients go into trials, and they tend to be relatively affluent, relatively well educated, relatively low comorbidity patients who perhaps don't reflect the real patients who then follow them into my clinic. And I would argue that real world evidence is imperfect data, and we'll come on to some of those issues later, but it's the perfect population because it's everybody who's happy for their data to be used in research. And that sort of guiding principle led to the creation of DataCan, a partnership between the Trust and the University in Leeds with UCL partners in London, Queen's in Belfast, Genomics England and IQVIA. And our vision at inception was to improve access to the data sets that exist on cancer patients for clinical, academic and commercial research, working to improve the quality of data, both at the point of collection and improve the quality of data once collected, and to make sure that that data represented the 4 nations of the UK. So this was not just an English solution, but to the 4 devolved nations. And to also move beyond the structured data that is in national data sets at the moment to integrate imaging, pathology, genetic molecular profiling, and perhaps the ultimate aspiration to also link to other sources of data such as primary care and perhaps most importantly, patient-reported data. So I'm not going to talk to you today about the national data sets, and Michael Chapman, who's going to follow me, I'm sure is going to talk about national data, but I'll just do one slide and I will allow Michael to speak to you about the great advantages. But let's be clear, the advantages of national data are absolutely their scale. And with the recent developments of NHS Digital, they have also resolved much of the security issues about linking data sets, and there are clear and well-defined IG processes. So I would encourage you to engage with all of those, but there are problems. The data is incomplete, and it's not possible to improve the data. You just have to access it as it is. And there's little access to the plain text of pathology, radiology reports, all of the letters, all of the narrative that describe the case. And there is no access to the detailed imaging, detailed pathology, and you can't get into highly detailed molecular profiling. So of course, the solution to that is not to go national, but to go local. And on the left-hand side, the bad way that we used to do this is to go to the case notes. And the glorious image in the middle is the joint replacement database of Leeds Teaching Hospital about 5 or 10 years ago, an entirely unworkable source of data. But of course, what has happened in the last 5 or 10 years is the NHS is moving towards digital records. And of course, behind those digital records are large tables of data that provide the perfect resource for real world data research. So in Leeds, we have a system that actually we've built ourselves. It's a trust-wide solution that now reaches not only to the breadth of the trust, but is also an integrated record across the whole city, linking primary care, mental health, social care, and community care to our hospital data. It has somewhere in the region of 3 million patients, which are known to Leeds. And we know everything about it, their outpatient visits, their admissions, but we also, of course, have all of their radiology reports, pathology reports, everything about their chemotherapy, their radiotherapy, their blood results. And we can importantly link that to NHS finance data, which allows us to look at sort of cost effectiveness of the interventions that we're looking at. So this is very typical of the study that we've been running in Leeds for many years. What we know is that we have a diagnosis to death record. So clinical trials very often will look at the value of a single intervention, a first line treatment, a treatment at first recurrence, and perhaps report data to progression. but actually we're always interested in what happens after the first and the second and the third and the fourth progression. So we've taken 1,000 sequential cases, every patient referred, not the patients who consented to go into trials, and we can then look at the outcomes those patients achieve and assess these patterns of recurrence. And that's something that's incredibly difficult, and I would probably say impossible on national data sets because recurrence data is so poorly defined. We've done that at a number of levels. So we've done that with our clinical teams, we've done that as academic publications, but we have also worked out mechanisms to do that with commercial partners. So through a long-standing partnership with IQVIA, one of the partners within DataCan, we do work on behalf of pharmaceutical companies who are very keen for us to be able to describe the characteristics of patients undergoing specific treatments, and we can pull out cohorts that match predefined criteria, and then we can describe the treatments they receive, the first, second, third line treatment, the overall survival, the outcomes achieved, which is great. But what I've just described to you has problems, and we are working to desperately improve those problems. And what I'd like to talk through is about some of those problems and the solutions that we think they have. So the first thing to say is single center studies are great because they are absolutely within your control, but they remain of relatively limited value. So the first thing that we'd be desperately keen to do is work collaboratively. And within DataCan, this was a response that the DataCan team did to the COVID pandemic. So we had a number of conversations at the very start of the pandemic and recognized, well, the fear at that time, what the impact of COVID was going to have on cancer services. So at the bottom right is the data that we amalgamated from Leeds, from Belfast, from 2 centres in London. And on the very right-hand edge, the catastrophic drop-off in cancer referrals that has become a major feature of cancer services in the UK and a desperate need to recover from this problem. And we could demonstrate that that was both a referral and an impact on treatments. On the right is the chemotherapy impact. And then with the team at UCL, we brought that together with data regarding comorbidity that actually did come from national data sets to try and project and predict the impact that COVID was going to have on cancer patients. Another example of a multi-center study we've done is a study that I've done with IQVIA support that has looked at my own clinical area of ovarian cancer. So this brought together 7 centers from 6 countries, mostly in Europe, but also South Korea, where we all pulled our data on ovarian cancer. Now, to work together, you need to make sure your data is in the same format of what we talk about as a common data model. So we spend a lot of time agreeing a data model. Each center then curated their data to that data model. And then rather than amalgamating that data across international boundaries, which is an IG nightmare, we developed a common analytic script, which we could share with each of the centers. And that script, that R package, would run against the data and produce a common output, which we could then combine. And with that, once again, we could describe the first line treatment, second line treatment, third line treatment, and the patterns of treatment from diagnosis to death and how they differed between different parts of the world and how different countries took different times to adopt targeted therapies such as bevacizumab and the PARP inhibitors. So multi-center studies need this common data model. And at the time, we essentially made that up for ovarian cancer. In retrospect, I would adopt an international standard. And the international standard that HDR UK are pushing people to adopt is the data model from Odyssey, the Observational Health Data Science and Informatics Group, known as OMOP. And OMOP is a data model which is specifically designed to support research. And a European organization, bottom left, the European Health Data and Evidence Network, has funded centers from across Europe to convert their data into the OMOP data model to facilitate collaborative research. And most recently, HDR UK have added additional funding to get UK centers. And on the last call to that, there are 15 UK centers who have applied for funding to convert their data into OMOP. So we've talked a little bit about curation. We need to get structured data to be curated. Now, at the end of the day, this hasn't moved from 1770, the top image here, the Mechanical Turk, which may look very clever, but at the end of the day, there's a person hidden inside the machine who needs to read the case notes and pull all of the data out. And that's an absolute restriction to scale. So the 1,000 patient studies we've done have tested the limit of our trainees. But when you start talking tens of thousands of patients and 100,000 patients, it's beyond manual curation. So we're beginning to work very closely with commercial partners in this space, and the company that do this exceptionally are Flatiron. And what Flatiron are doing is the mechanical curation, but they're also working towards a world of artificial intelligence and machine learning that can read the case note and extract the curated data. So the plain text remains a problem. And at the end of the day, 85% of our record is plain text. And we therefore need next generation informatics to be applied to that. So artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the application of natural language processing, which can read all of this data. And then, of course, we get into the IG issues. An individual center reviewing its data is not challenging ethically, but moving that data around between centers, and in particular, crossing international boundaries, is complicated and it is challenging. And there is a solution, and that is that you don't move the data. So rather than bringing the data to the analysis, you bring the analysis to the data. And there are now systems called federated analysis where the data stays within the firewall of each organization, and a central analytics server can reach in and begin to process that data locally and begin to take utterly anonymous data back to the center to provide the overall analysis. So that's a very important stepwise change that we need to deliver to support these multi-center real-world evidence studies. So I hope in those 12 minutes or whatever I've been talking, I've encouraged you to think about the use of real-world data. And whereas at the beginning I said that real-world evidence was imperfect data on a perfect population, I would suggest that there is a future, and there is a future where advanced analytics, so the application of NLP, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, which can generate curated data at scale, does offer a vision of near perfect data on a perfect population. And with that, I'll say thank you. And I understand we're taking questions at the end of 3 sessions, so I'll pause there.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Geoff. We are sticking to time pretty well. Yes, you're right. So we will hear from our next 2 speakers, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end of our first morning session. So please do keep popping your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we'll make sure we get to those. So we will next be hearing from Mark Lawler from DataCan. So I'll hand over to Mark now.
Thanks, Hannah. Can you see my slides okay?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so again, just to segue on from Geoff's talk, Geoff and myself work very closely together. It's all about the data. One of the things we sort of decided about maybe 5-6 years ago was really to drive a big data for better health agenda. And we identified really 3 main areas. One was breaking down the silos, so getting researchers, clinicians, industry players, regulators, and patients all to collaborate and to share their data. Most importantly, to learn from the data and to recognize that data may come from many different sources. So not just sort of clinical data and omic data, but epidemiological data, socioeconomic data, for example, wearables. And then how do we use this intelligence really to improve both the health and the well-being of the citizen, but also contribute to societal benefit and provide an evidence base for influencing, for policy, etc. And so really, the way in which we looked at this, and I'm just going to use an example in relation to genomic sharing of data and clinical data, but it really aligns to any of what I've talked about so far, is really looking at a cooperative approach. So really, one of the key things is involving patients in that co-creation of data science approaches that really deliver patient benefit and also deliver impact. One of the things we did very early, and this was led by Bartha Knoppers at McGill University in Canada, was develop a framework for responsible sharing of genomic and health-related data, and then look to see how can you link that data, how can you access that data, Particularly in cancer, you need to think about things on a longitudinal basis. It's not just a single look at the data. You in general need to look at it over a period of time. And then, as Geoff highlighted, how do we accelerate data analytics? And in some situations, that involves porting the data or the solution to the data. One of the things we really highlighted was the idea of having a cancer data knowledge network, and moved to what at the time was much more a selfish silo mentality to a much more open source collaborative culture. Cognizant that that's really important in that setting to also think about trust and the use of data and the patient perspective. One of the things we did was brought together a coalition of the willing, if you like, HDR UK, European Alliance for Personalised Medicine, European Cancer Patient Coalition, and the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health, to look to see how do you really do this in a way that's trustworthy. And looking at ways in which the citizens as the data donors are very much at the heart of the decision making, and balancing that ethical rigor with the ability to democratize data analysis so that you get both maximum scientific, clinical, but also societal value. One of the things that Michael, who's talking after me, will talk about is secure data environments or trusted research environments, and that idea of the 5 safes. Safe people working on safe projects, utilizing safe data in safe places and generating safe outputs. Sorry, I'm suddenly going blind. One of the areas that we focused on initially, and this is a driver project within the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health, was looking at ways in which we can actually bring information together. There are a lot of different knowledge bases in relation to unknown gene mutations and variants of certain significance that can be useful to the cancer community. But the problem was all these efforts were very much siloed. So there were maybe 100 different efforts to look at collecting information and collating it, but none of it was coming together. None of them spoke the same language. So one of the things we did was a varied interpretation for Cancer Consortium driver project of GA4GH, where we actually looked at developing what we sort of acronymed a data translator to harmonize all that information and also to make it freely available to the scientific community. And I've put the reference in there and that, and this can be accessed by anybody in terms of looking at ways in which we can bring that data sets together, which is really important if we're trying to look at what is the impact of particular genetic variants or genomic variants in relation to cancer. So I suppose the principle that we've sort of aligned to and that Geoff highlighted in relation to how we set up DataCan and how we work together in DataCan is really that sort of idea of a cancer data ecosystem that goes right across the pathway. So prevention, early diagnosis, treatment, patient recovery and rehabilitation, and also enhances that innovation piece and working together with industry. I'm not going to, other than highlighting the importance of the patient being at the center of this process. And one of the things that's really been very rewarding in the work that DataCan has done over the last 3 years has been the involvement of patients, and patients being at the heart of what we do. So they're very much involved in genuine co-creation. They're involved in all our discussions, including our discussions with commercial partners. And one of the sentence I love that Pete Wheatstone coined in this paper that we published on how we work together is, as patients, we not only are empowered, but we feel empowered. And I think that sort of captures the nub of what's the really important way in which we need to do data science, co-creating it with patients. Then obviously, just as soon as we set up DataCan, the world changed. And obviously the COVID-19 pandemic had a significant impact in relation to cancer services and cancer patients. Edward Vidoliak, who's a colleague of mine from Croatia, shared this statement with me, which really startled me, saying people are starting to fear a COVID-19 diagnosis more than a cancer diagnosis. And anecdotally, we'd heard the same thing in the UK, but there was really no data to support that or refute that statement from Edward. So together with colleagues from UCL, we developed a real-time data approach to access data from hospital trusts across the UK, and also modeled excess deaths. And you would have seen Geoff presenting some of that. I'm just going to cut to the chase in terms of what the key messages were. 7 out of 10 people with suspicion of cancer either not going to their GP or not getting referred to cancer services. 4 out of 10 not getting access to their chemotherapy at the appropriate time. And this was really the first data that drew attention to the government, to academia, to the NHS and the public of the disastrous impact of COVID-19 on cancer services and cancer patients. And as you can see here, I'm not going to go through this in detail in the interest of time, but you can see right across the cancer pathway and also in cancer research, the significant disruption. If we focus on colorectal cancer, which is a particular interest of mine, you can see here the impact on cancer services in terms of endoscopies. You can see there a 91% drop between 2019 and 2020. So it's very significant impact. And if you think about it in terms of, we've actually been quite successful in the UK in terms of improving 5-year survival for different cancers. I've just taken 3 cancers here, lung, breast, and colorectal. You can see the impact of, so 2 decades we've achieved this, 2 years we may see an impact that leads to, for example, the impact of COVID-19 and colorectal cancer being set back almost a decade. And one of the things we then realized, obviously, that is, cancer knows no borders. So we brought the data that I presented to you there to the European Cancer Organization and to WHO Europe, really to show them that this was an impact that was probably happening all over Europe. They immediately set up a special network on the impact of COVID-19 on cancer, which is, I'm privileged to chair along with Miriam Krul, who's a pharmacist who's leading the vaccine effort, the COVID-19 vaccine effort in the Netherlands. We rapidly convened a series of experts from right across Europe, and we developed a 7-point plan to build back better. You can see there the cancer backlog was top of our list, but also things like restoring confidence in the cancer health services, looking at ways in which we can tackle medicine, equipment shortages, and also cancer workload gaps. And you can see there the importance of rapid deployment of cancer intelligence. One of the things that we really realized that cancer needed to be at the top of the recovery agenda. So we actually developed a campaign and used the data to inform that campaign. And we demanded that cancer really must be put at the top of the European agenda. But in order really to underpin that campaign, we needed data. So what we did was we looked to see what was the impact at the European level in relation to the COVID-19 and cancer. And I'm just going to share some quite startling figures with you. So 100 million cancer screenings have not been performed in Europe as a result of the pandemic. One of the results of that is that there are now 1 million cancer patients undiagnosed due to the presentational or diagnostic delay. And we're in a race against time to identify those missing cancer diagnoses, identify them as early as possible. You all know that if we diagnose cancer early, we have a much greater chance of success in terms of treatment. But if we've late diagnosis, stage shift, that advantage completely disappears, particularly for some of the cancers like lung, colorectal, etc. You can see here the impact on treatment, but also impact on patients in relation to less likely to attend screening appointments or go to hospital for cancer treatments. But just the last one here, I just emphasized to you as well. What we found was that 4 out of 10 cancer healthcare workforces were feeling burnt out because of their Herculean efforts in relation to driving the response to COVID pandemic and infection control, and 3 out of 10 showing signs of clinical depression. Our campaign then, which is a Europe-wide campaign, was translated into 30 European languages. Here they are here, just to show you. I've even managed to get in Gaeilge, which is the Irish language in the Republic of Ireland, which is where I'm from. And what we felt was that this was really important. But the other important was to continue to capture data. So one of the things we've done is we've set up a data navigator. This was launched last year at the European Cancer Summit, which is really an interactive visualization tool to look at the impact of COVID-19 on cancer. In its first version, it looked in 17 European countries at the impact on screening, diagnosis, treatment of patients and on health professionals, as I showed you. Just to show you the impact of this, we received the European Communique Award in 2022 in the category of excellence in communicating and using data. So you can see here, here's where data is being used to influence policy. And also what we then found was that this statistic has now been quoted widely. It's been quoted most widely of any statistic in relation to the impact of COVID in Europe. 1 million undiagnosed cases, both by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and also by Stella Kyriakides, who's the Health Commissioner of the European Union. And so again, the importance of using data to drive change at the political level. We've now updated the data navigator. It now has about 70 new different studies identified and analyzed, and we've extended from 17 countries to 13 countries. All of this is freely available on the website. I've put the link there, and these slides will be available for you after the session. We've upgraded with new functionalities in relation to different tumor types. You can look at different parts of Europe. You can compare Western Europe with Eastern Europe. You can look at different years of data. But just to emphasize, COVID has not gone away. People say to you, oh yeah, we've no problem with COVID anymore. We still have a problem. You can see some of the data here from Germany, from Turkey, from Austria, just as examples. So COVID is still having an impact in relation to cancer in Europe. We still need more data, so we're actually looking at if people are interested in collaborating with us on this. We also have a lot of analysis we'd like to do, so if any of you early career researchers are interested in doing some analysis with me, please contact us, and we'd really be interested in that. And just to emphasize that this campaign, don't let COVID stop you from tackling cancer. And just to give you a little, this is a little sort of teaser in relation to, this has worked so well in relation to COVID and cancer. We've now actually developed something that we call the European Cancer Pulse to track inequalities in cancer right across Europe. And we launched this there 2 weeks ago in Brussels at the European Cancer Summit 2022. At the moment, we have more than 120 different data fields in 34 countries. It'll continue to evolve. This is phase 1 of it, but again, very interested if anybody is interested in either working with us, but also in sharing data with us, because we want to capture as much data as we can and possible to highlight what the cancer inequalities are in cancer in Europe and how we can address them. So I hope I've shown you that unlocking the power of data really has an opportunity, a significant opportunity to improve both our health and well-being. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Mark, for sharing that with us. That was really, really great. We're doing well, ever so slightly ahead of time, so that's good. We'll have more time for questions. Please do make sure you pop those in the Q&A as you think of them. So next up, we'll be moving on to Michael Chapman from NHS Digital. So over to you, Michael.
Hopefully I'm now unmuted, just working out how to do that and share slides at the same time. So I hope everyone can see my slides. So thank you for having me here. I'm Michael Chapman. I'm Director of Research and Clinical Trials at NHS Digital, and I'll say a bit about what NHS Digital is in a moment. But I've got a bit of form in this area. I was previously one of Health Data Research UK's, or at one of Health Data Research UK's scientific sites. And then before that, worked for a long time at Cancer Research UK. And my first role in this area was as a program manager at NCRI. So I am delighted to be back talking to NCRI early career researchers. And it's an area really close to my heart. And unsurprisingly, therefore, I agree with everything that Mark and Geoff have said. And I'm going to take us from the sublime to the ridiculous and talk about the literal part of the title of this workshop, which is about finding and accessing health data. So I'm going to talk to you about how to find the data that we hold nationally in the NHS, and then go into a little bit of detail about how to access it, including some bits about developing areas like secure data environments. So let me work out how to move the slides on. I've got too many screens in front of me. Right, what is NHS Digital? NHS Digital is the National Digital Data and Technology Delivery Partner for the NHS and the social care system. We currently exist as a separate arm's length body focused on those functions. We are moving in a month to 6 weeks' time to become part of NHS England, so to have one central NHS arm's length body responsible for the leading the health system. And that will increasingly put data and digital technology really at the heart of the NHS, which, I think one of the themes coming through here is the way in which we use the data that's collected through routine healthcare has immense power to improve that healthcare, but we need to do better at that. So that's our mission. And we collect a vast amount of data, and that data is already being used. So we publish a lot of that data openly. You go to our website, we publish about 300 official health and care data sets every year. The most recent one was surveys of adolescent mental health during COVID. That's in some of the papers today, showing, as you can imagine, some really devastating impacts and devastating changes during that period. But there's a lot of data behind that that isn't placed in the public domain. 500 billion, that would have gone up. That's an out-of-date figure, but vast quantities of data in our various data sets. And that gets used constantly, really, to support health and care research, to support planning, to support audit, and to support service improvement. So this is my big wall of logos that I'd like to show. On the left-hand side are some of the big COVID-19 studies, and all of those received data from NHS Digital to support their work. We don't take any credit for the work. That's all done by people like yourselves, by people like Mark, by people like Geoff, who have the ideas and the persistence and the dedication to get on with that. But we sit in the background trying to get the data that is needed to the right places. And then over on the right-hand side are some big things that are either ongoing studies, CPRD, UK Biobank, massive important resources, Genomics England, really foundational bits of the UK health data infrastructure, and some emerging things, the NHS Gallery trial, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, major trial of multi-cancer early detection technology being run in the NHS at the moment, and Our Future Health, which is one of the most ambitious life sciences projects around at the moment, trying to recruit up to 5 million people to study the genetic and the environmental causes of disease, to improve prevention and to improve early detection. But fundamentally, all of this uses data that's provided by patients, collected by the NHS. And we are really privileged to be able to use that. And we take that incredibly seriously. And we take that seriously on two fronts. We take seriously that we need to use it to improve health, but also we need to protect and to build people's trust in how that data is used. And there is a tension there. So into the literal bit of the talk, how do you know what data we've got? We have a catalogue. It sounds quite basic, but you can go to our website. I've put the link on there, so when you get the slides, that should work. If not, Google NHS Digital Data Catalogue, and that will come up. Probably the first link, hopefully. And that's got the list of all of our data sets that we make available publicly. It's not everything that we hold. Some of what we hold is held for particular purposes and can't be released to external users, but everything that we can release is in that catalogue. And if you click through the links, it gives details of the data set, along with any restrictions on how that can be accessed and used, because some of these data sets are only available in certain environments. So for example, they may only be available through a secure data environment, and some of them can only be used for particular purposes. We've brought in a lot of data during the pandemic, and some of that data can only be used for purposes of COVID-19 research. And of course, I'll say in this environment that all health research is now COVID-19 research. There is nothing that doesn't involve the pandemic in some way, but there are limitations on some of our data sets. There are also some constraints on linkages. We've got a lot of data, and lots of it has come to us. Lots of it's been inherited from other organizations. It's been brought in either as organizations have merged or simply as we've taken on data sets from others. And that means that we don't have what I'd like, which is a nice conformed data model across absolutely all of our assets. They're not even all on the same system. They're not even all in systems run by the same organization at the moment. So there are some annoying operational restrictions for very pragmatic reasons about what we can link to what, and what is easy and what is difficult. So that is laid out to some extent in our data catalogue. and certainly discussions with our data access team will bring that out. You can also look at the next level of detail. We've got a metadata catalog, which will let you look through the field level details of what's in there. We need to get better still at showing the data quality, at showing the completeness. This, as Geoff was saying, this is data on a national scale, but it's often imperfect data, so we do need to get better at that. The other place you can go and look is the HDR UK gateway, which has the same information, so it's mirrored in both places. But as well as the data that we've got, this has the data that's available in Scotland, in Wales, in Northern Ireland from other data controllers across the Health Data Research Alliance, which now has such an enormous number of members that I'm not even going to try and get the number right, but I think it's about 80 different members, and their data sets will all be in that metadata catalog. So do go and look at the gateway as well. So once you know what we've got and you want to use it, how do you get hold of the stuff? So traditionally, we have had one model, which is that you come to us and you say, I'd like some data. We make you jump through a complex application process, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. And then once you're through that, you sign a data sharing agreement, and we send you a copy of the data. That is quite an old-fashioned way of doing things, and it's a way of doing things that requires us to make that application process onerous and complex, because we have to be really cautious if we're sending a copy of even pseudonymized but still rich patient data to another organization. We have to carefully check the purposes, we have to check the legal basis, we have to check the security, we have to check that the right ethics in place. There is a lot of complexity in that process. So we are trying to move away from that to use of secure data environments and trusted research environments. So rather than us sending data to the user, we bring the user to the data, and Geoff and team have been guinea pigs, I think it's fair to say. In this, they've been extremely patient while we've tried to get this working, but we are getting there, and from next year onwards, this will start to, you'll start to see this increase rapidly. I'm expecting any minute now the confirmation that the first brand new user has gone into our newly upgraded environment, and then we'll be moving all of the existing users on the environment we set up for COVID purposes across, and then we'll be starting to open the doors to the rest of the world during the course of the next year. So expect in future, if you're coming for data nationally from the NHS, to be asked to come and work in either the environment that NHS Digital, in future NHS England, will have, or in another similarly accredited environment, rather than bringing the data to where you are. The other change in the way in which we're making data available that I wanted to talk briefly about is our NHS Digitrials service. And this is trying to bring those two worlds of real world data and clinical trials together, and say there is an absolutely fantastic opportunity to better use routinely collected data to make clinical trials faster and more efficient to run. And we've done that through COVID. We've been able to support, as you saw on one of my previous slides, various of those big COVID studies. And that happens to our Digitrials service. It's got a series of layered services, starting with feasibility. How many patients with particular characteristics exist in England in the NHS, and where are they? So that people can better plan trials and open sites in the right places, more accurately predict how long recruitment is going to take. Then moving on to recruitment. So we're using this with trials like NHS Gallery, with studies like Our Future Health, the ability to use centrally held NHS records to identify individuals who may be suitable for a particular study, and then write to them to say, would you be interested in this? If they're not interested, they can throw the letter away, and we never bother them again. If they are interested, they can contact the investigator, they can sign up to that study, and the study team can take it from there. Communication is about how we stay in touch with those individuals during the course of a trial, and then outcomes is about how we follow them up over the long term. And as Geoff said, there are weaknesses in some of this data. It's not great for oncology studies where you're looking for recurrence, but there are places where actually being able to identify the fact that somebody's been admitted to hospital, or as the ultimate outcome, having up-to-date information on mortality, is very important, and it's an extremely efficient way to do that without taking up a lot of research nurse time. So we're going to increasingly roll those services out. So that's the services. How do you actually get access? Well, all data access processes look roughly the same at the top level. There's an inquiry, come on to talk to us, tell us what you'd like to do, discuss what you'd like to access, and we can talk to you about what's possible. Then apply, fill out an application form. There's a review process. Our review process has a few stages to it. It's set up for that dissemination model. So our team look at it internally. We also have review from an independent group of advisors who, as the name suggests, advise us on this. And they're looking at issues of public trust, legality, public benefit. Then once all of that has gone through, it's an access process. We do come out and audit people to check that they're using the data as they said they would, not doing something else with it. And then at the end of the study, we ask people to delete it. And all of that is published on our website, both the process and the outcomes of that process. So we publish all of our data sharing agreements, so you can see how people are using the data. The one thing I would say to people, particularly to early career researchers, is this can seem like a really annoying bureaucratic process, and to some extent it is, but it's an open book exam. We publish the standards that we assess these applications against. So if you write an application that details the standards and answers directly all of the questions that our team have asked, then it should go through relatively smoothly. The advice I give people is, please don't try and fight the process, no matter how crazy the process seems. If you follow that process, things will move through. Where we get into trouble and where things take months and years to work through the process is where we're working at cross purposes, and people are trying to do things which may seem completely sensible and logical to them, but they just don't address the question or the ask that we're trying to meet. So that's the one tip I give everybody. This is an open book exam. Work with our team, answer the questions, and things will get through. I'm going to stop there, but I'm really happy to take questions either on the specifics that I've talked about or things more generally. Now I'll work out how to stop sharing.
Looks good. I'll jump in there. Thank you very much, Michael. That was a really great end to our first session for the morning. So I will hand over to Douglas and Amit, who are going to be triaging some of our questions that have come in. I can see there's a couple in there already. So if I hand over to you both, and we'll be able to pass some questions on to our speakers.
Perfect. So thank you, Hannah. Yeah, firstly, just to say thank you to the three speakers, 3 great talks. I mean, definitely to me, it feels like we're at quite a pivotal moment in our use of real world data for cancer and beyond. So I think it's a great opportunity actually to hear you speak and to be able to ask questions. So on that note, yeah, we do have a couple of questions in the chat. So I'll kick off by reading out the first one. So it's from Harshani, and she's just asking about whether there are any practical resources for early career researchers that are interested in carrying out federated analysis, and that are particularly keen to publish smaller projects with other centres. And Harshani just mentioned that she had come up against some difficulties in data sharing agreements. So I'm not sure if anyone has any tips or advice with that, please.
I'm happy to give a first response to that, Amit. So I think it's fair to say that this concept of federated analysis is relatively new. And it is absolutely an aspiration, and very senior leaders within NHS England and NHS Digital would talk about a move towards federated analysis. And absolutely, I think we need to accept that that is something coming in the future. What's great about federated analysis, I showed a graphic from a group called Data Shield, who were initially based in Newcastle. I think they're now based in Liverpool. And we've begun working with a team in Maastricht in the Netherlands who have coded, and critically, they've coded open source federated analytics. So it's absolutely possible to go to these guys' website, download the software, but it's not simple. It is not a straightforward approach. These are dedicated federated analytics servers that allow systems to talk to each other in the correct way. So I'm afraid the short answer is I don't know of practical resources, but I desperately encourage you to engage and become involved in them. And so once again, forgive me for banging on about cancer, but in the cancer space, we are establishing a European collaboration. And what's great about the European collaboration is it's recognized the importance of early career researchers. So there is pump priming to get people involved and engaged with that. And in many ways, the early career researchers work with more senior practitioners who are capable of guiding them in ways to do things. Because at the end of the day, data sharing agreements can be very challenging to organize. Goodness me, I couldn't agree with you more. Data sharing agreements in the UK are challenging. Data sharing agreements across international boundaries. And when you recognize that the 7 federal regions of Germany all have different data sharing agreements, there's not just a German answer to how to do it. There's many German answers on how to do it. To be honest, I've got 2 grade trying to sort that problem out. So my solution is we need a new way of doing it, and let's do federated data analysis. But so I'm sorry, I can't give you the website to go and learn how to do it.
Fair enough. Thank you for that answer. And so it's good to hear that there are, resources coming on board, although it sounds like we're still at an early stage in the process. And like you said, there is no one size fits all answer to that problem. And actually that comes on potentially nicely to a question that I was thinking of asking. We'll come on to all of the questions in the chat, but just because it dovetails nicely, you mentioned, which I like, this analogy of real world data currently being, imperfect data in the perfect population, but we're trying to use technology and AI, etc., to make that data as close to perfect as possible. We just mentioned federated learning and data sharing agreements as a challenge potentially. What to all of you, what do you think are the main barriers that we're going to face over the next few years to making this a reality? Because I feel like, again, we're near the beginning-ish. What's going to be our biggest barriers going forward?
I think one of the areas is really that, ability to work with each other and trust, is really important. I think, as we've sort of highlighted in terms of what we've done in DataCam, involving the patient is critical because it actually makes the research better. I mean, that's what we found both in our academic partnerships, but also our commercial partnerships, and that sort of, truly empowering the patient to be a co-creator is really important. I think it's a huge opportunity here. I think it's a huge opportunity for the UK to lead in this area, but we do need to sort of break down any potential perceived hurdles so that we are truly sort of, embracing this new future that's, coming, rather quickly to us. And I think that's the way it should be. But it's just making sure that we have that, sort of that everybody is on the same page, and that we're working together to really achieve something significant. And that would be sort of my viewpoint. And obviously the other thing is recognizing, as we've done in terms of some of what I presented, that these are European challenges as well as UK challenges, and sort of working together at a European level. And Geoff showed some nice examples. The one in ovarian is a particularly nice example where everybody's trying to find the solutions to this. I just think the UK can be a leader in this space, but we do need to get our act together.
Yes, I'd echo Mark's point, certainly about trust, and I'd add to that there is a vast amount of just hard graft to be done to organize, curate these data sets into the conformed data models that then let us build. And we need to do that work in the open, and we need to do it as far as we possibly can once and then share, rather than constantly duplicating effort. I think across the community we are duplicating a vast amount of effort at the moment with people doing the same sort of work on the same data sets, and that makes the whole thing really efficient. So we need to get to the flywheel where once the first person has cleaned and conformed the data set, that becomes available for everyone. And that's where, again, moving our analysis, centralizing some of our analysis in some of these environments, building the communities around those environments where we can share code, we can share resources. That's what's going to accelerate some of this work as much as the governance and the technology.
Yeah, because there is a future, a mythical future at the moment, in my view, of artificial intelligence and machine learning just crawling all over the records and just pulling all of this data out. Fabulous, but the AI and machine learning needs teaching, and the place it gets taught is on highly curated data. So at the end of the day, what the world needs is highly curated data, and then highly curated data that people are willing to share with each other, because we can't develop organizational specific AI and machine learning. I mean, the problem will never get solved if we do that. And that's where we need to work out ways to share data, that people in one center can use other people's data to validate their models and can enhance and contribute. So it's the collaborative effort that this is going to take, but finding out ways to do that securely, safely, and with the trust of patients, as Mark and Michael have both mentioned, is critically important to this. But I do hope the future is not finding a registrar to go through 1,000 case notes to curate the data. That there has to be a better way of doing it. With the greatest respect to every registrar, including me, who's ever done that, there has to be a better way of doing that.
I think as a registrar, I'd breathe a sigh of relief to hear you say that. And, yeah, never again, thanks. I think, yeah, the points you made about the patients being at the centre, I think is really important, because I think you've all mentioned industry, even Michael, in your talk with NHS Digital, I noticed AstraZeneca on your user list. So clearly there's this collaboration. I think we know that there can be competing interests sometimes between, as well as common interests, competing interests between academia and industry, but patients are, should be central to everyone's interests. So it makes sense that they're going to help drive this forward. I think Siri, or Kerry, apologise if I'm saying that wrong, has a question that might be being answered at the moment, so I'll wait to see the typed answer. But Keir's asked something which I think, again, dovetails on nicely from what we just said, and he's asking about the fact that these data sets will require accurate and comprehensive coding of what can be unstructured data in our system, and obviously we don't want registrars to be curating this. So are there any moves in place to improve the way data is coded in the NHS? And I guess that can mean either nationally for all organizations, or individual organizations that are using techniques that may be reproducible. Can you give us some practical examples of how we're doing that?
Well, the first point that we've always taken, and in many ways one of the reasons that we've passionately pursued the development of our own electronic health record in Leeds, is that if you want better data, you have to make that easy at the point of care. So the whole process of just delivering care captures high quality data. You don't deliver care and then go to your office and pull out the data for research. They need to become the same process. And I have to say, one of the most effective techniques that we found in Leeds to improve missing data or inaccurate data is just to give data back to clinicians. So allow clinicians to see their own data, to see what data they've got that is complete, to see what data they've got is incomplete. So, if we were looking at breast cancer and the impact of whether a tumor is HER2 positive or HER2 negative, there should be 3 lines on the curve, which are the HER2 positive, the HER2 negative, and the you haven't filled the database in line. And what that does is it tends to encourage clinicians, particularly, so I'm quite into this concept of gamification. So you turn it into a competitive game, and who's got the highest score. So are you a good clinician or are you a bad clinician at collecting data? Because I think clinicians are hugely competitive, and they all want to be the best, even at a subconscious level. And if you show them that their data is incomplete, they improve it. So let's get better data at the point of care. Coding is coding. The NHS does it to work out how the money flows around. It's incredibly useful data, but I'd always rather go back to source document verification personally. So I'd rather use the clinical notes instead of the coder's interpretation of the clinical notes. But that's why it's a big problem, because I don't think there is a simple solution that just says, oh yeah, we need more coders.
Yeah, I think that's very relatable. I think, especially as a junior doctor, you're so far distant from coding, you never necessarily get someone that formally sits you down and explains why it's so important. And clearly, it's important currently for reimbursement in financial regions, but going forward, it will be important because data is going to be more important. So I think it's a really interesting concept to try and engage clinicians better in this themselves. So yeah, thank you.
I mean, just in terms of your last point as well, just I think, one of the ways in which we sort of improve that sort of interaction between academia, industry, the patient, the regulator, etc., is to make sure, and it's a principle we have in DataCan, that there's fair value for everybody. So there's fair value for the NHS, there's fair value for the patient, there's fair value for the academic researcher, and there's fair value for the industry partner. I think if we can achieve that, I'm not necessarily saying that's easy, but I think if you go into those conversations with that principle in place, it certainly achieves a lot more. Whereas if you're going in with a sort of a protectionist viewpoint that I'm just going to protect my own data, then that's what we've been doing for the last 5 years unsuccessfully, to be perfectly frank. So it's really changing that sort of almost the culture to being one of that respecting everybody's need to have fair value from the use of data in the health space.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this mindset shift, I guess, around realizing we can't do it all alone is definitely important. So we've got a few more questions in the chat. So it's one from Seema, or a couple from Seema. So the first question is about contributing our own data. So again, it might be a practical one, but how can we contribute our own data? So I think, she's saying that there are people that are doing lots of good work with data, but the data sets they generate are remaining siloed. So what's the best way of contributing this data to a common pool?
So the clinical trials question is a fabulous one. And actually it relates to another question that also got answered. I think Mark has typed an answer of, so there are clinical trial data sets which are fabulous in their quality. And at one level, they reported their endpoint and their data was siloed. But many of those patients live on. And a classic example that DataCan began to try and solve are pediatric cancer trials, where large numbers of patients are cured, but the issue is late effects. So there are fabulous trial data sets from the 70s and 80s that reported their outcome about which treatment was better. But we would love to now track the 30, 40, 50-year late effects in those patients. And the two approaches are, let's find all the patients and bring them all back to clinics, which is entirely unfeasible and unreasonable, or can we track those patients into the national data set? So if we could link clinical trial data sets, not live data sets, not live trials that haven't reported their endpoint yet, but complete trials that have been siloed, can we start siloing them inside the trusted research environment, allow NHS Digital to link those data sets securely, but then you could actually take patients recruited to a late 1970s pediatric cancer trial and say, what's the late cardiac toxicity of those patients? So Mark has referenced the fact that HDR UK have got that as a major driver program to link cancer data and cardiovascular to see the intersection there. But yeah, we need to bring clinical trials. And I have to say, I think that I'm frustrated that DataCan got distracted, as the rest of the world did, by COVID, because that's one of the things we have failed to achieve, because the trial centres have been less willing to share that data with us than I hoped they might be. But it's a challenge I am not willing to give up on, because it's too important.
Yeah, no, certainly, just to echo what Geoff said, very keen to chat to you. And I've also put a sort of response in the chat to one of the previous people question. And obviously the other way is, potentially looking at, can we host it on the HDR UK gateway, which you'll hear about in the second part of this session. But certainly we'd be interested in having those conversations, because I agree with Geoff, there's potentially data there that's really important, but that we haven't really got to grips with at the moment, but certainly be keen to look at ways in which we can do that.
And the issue is one of consent. So the trials offices are concerned that patients weren't asked if their data could be linked. So the first thing I would do tomorrow is put a standard question into every NCRI clinical trial, which says, in addition to this trial, are you happy that we link your data in the long term through publicly available national data sets according to best practice? Because my experience is every patient who's willing to go into the trial would be absolutely relaxed about that. It's just that in the 1970s and 1980s, we didn't ask. And that's the thing we need to find the solution to.
And we do need to sort out some of those legacy trials where the question wasn't asked. But for those of you who are at an early stage of your careers, go and look at the HRA website. They've got template wording. If you use that template wording, that's the appropriate wording at the time. data custodians like ourselves will respect that wording and those patient wishes.
Thank you. You almost wonder if it could become a part of consent up front for these trials, but once the data's completed.
That's what it should be. Yeah.
So thank you for that. Just before I forget, we'll try and get onto the last two questions in the interest of time, but just because this is generic to everyone, you mentioned, I think, before about getting in touch with you about data analysis, and just now again, you guys are mentioning that you want people to get in touch with you if they've got data they want to contribute, etc. Should they do this via the NCRI and Hannah, or would you put your emails in the chat? I'll leave that to you to decide later.
Yeah, I've already put my email in the response to one of the questions, so certainly happy to reach out, or it can be coordinated through Hannah if that's easier.
Yeah, so
I'm not saying we'll provide the solution, but at least we can look and see what's possible.
Yeah, and HDR UK is a fabulously broad church. So, Mark and I have very much talked about cancer today, but there's a breadth of interest, and it's very likely that we could point you towards an equivalent to Mark and I, who works in cardiovascular, GI, and mental health. And, it's about linking people up. So, I'm happy. I don't mind how those contacts are made. People can contact me directly. I put my email at the end of my slides that people can call that off. But if people come through HDR UK, at one level, they can come to me in sort of my general clinical role, and I can farm that out to the right person. And the other thing is, just because there aren't people who are experts, don't let that stop you expressing your interest, because in many ways, the best ideas come from the early career people in my general experience, because you have ideas that people just haven't thought of before.
That's brilliant, thank you. So just in the interest of time, I think we've got 5 minutes and 2 questions to see if we can maybe get through both. So first question from Seema. Again, might relate to these barriers of how we do this. So how do you overcome the variability and challenges of EHRs when pulling data from different healthcare organizations with different, multiple different systems? Are there people that are working on this process of extracting data from variable systems?
Well, we've tried and failed 20 years ago to have a single IT system for the NHS, because that would have been a perfect solution. But I don't think anyone's going to go down that route again. So NHS England, I think it is, are now speaking absolutely that we need to come up with regional convergence. We need to get people to come towards a small number of electronic health records. So that is a part solution. But I would go back to the common data model, because at one level, I would argue that any electronic health record is ultimately collecting largely the same amount of data on the same patients, and therefore all you have to do is agree the common data model, and then everybody can do to the point-to-point conversion of their data to that common data model, and suddenly there's a common data model. And the perfect example of that, of the OMOP, is they have validated the international guidelines on hypertension treatment. They had the idea and they ran the project in 8 weeks, and they used data from 600 million patients worldwide in that analysis, because they were all sitting in the same common data model. And therefore it was just a question of running analysis across people's data, as opposed to, okay, goodness me, how am I going to go to the case notes and find all of this data? So common convergence of EHR is good, but ultimately a common data model that anybody can get their data into is what you need to do.
Perfect, thank you. I think that answers the question really nicely. And so we did have one more question, but I think it may have just been answered. Yeah, so hopefully actually that means we're just in time, which is great. So thank you all, both for the talks and the answers just gave. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Lovely, I'll jump in there. Thank you, Amit, for triaging all of those questions. And thank you to everybody for asking them. That's really great. So yeah, we're pretty much bang on time. We're going to go for a short break now, just for 5 minutes. So if you'd like to go and grab a drink, a cup of tea, anything, please do take a moment to do that. And then we'll be back at 11:15, ready to hear from the team at HDR UK. Thanks, everybody. See you in a moment. start by handing over to Ruth, please.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Gosh, to follow those three speakers, quite a challenge. They were brilliant talks. Right, I'm just going to share my screen. And I always forget to do this. I've got a video to play, so I'm just going to make sure that I'm sharing my audio as well, because it's one of those things that catches me out every single time. No, I can't work out how to do it. There we go. Share sound. And hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it. It's just popped up now.
Perfect. Oh, thanks for the invite. I'm working from one screen as well, so I can't see you. That's brilliant. Oh. Okay, perfect. Hello everyone. Thanks for coming along today. It's great to be a guest speaker as well. Hopefully you're going to learn a bit from my talk today. I realised that I'm actually signed into this as HDR UK events. So I haven't got my name up. So my name is Ruth Milne, and I'm part of the technology team here at Health Data Research. And today I'm going to give you an introduction to the Health Data Research Innovation Gateway, or the Gateway for short, as we call it. And I'm going to share with you how it might be useful in terms of finding and accessing health data that's relevant to your work. So just very briefly, what I'd like to cover is very quickly who we are as an organisation, a bit of background about the Gateway, how you can search for data sets on the Gateway, and how you might request access to data sets that you're interested in via the Gateway, and also how we're working towards harmonising the data access process in general. And then I'm just going to end with a couple of summary resource slides and how you can learn more. Okay, so first, a little bit about Health Data Research UK. We're a young organisation. We're almost 5 years old. We're a registered charity supported by 10 funders, including NCRI, Welcome, MRC, to name a few. We have a central office located in London, which is where I am right now, but we actually work and are based across the whole of the UK. And our ethos is very collaborative. We work together across academia, healthcare, industry, charity partners, along with the patients and the public, to help us achieve our mission, which is to unite the UK's health data to enable discoveries that change people's lives. So one of the ways that we're uniting health data is through the development of the necessary infrastructure and services required for population level advanced analytics and research, like the Health Data Research Innovation Gateway. Before I go into a little bit more detail about what the Gateway is and what it does, I would like to share a video which explains why the Gateway was created and how it's a useful resource for researchers. Hopefully this should work.
I think a major problem for researchers is accessing data in a timely way and being able to find the data that's out there, and then being allowed to use the tools that they want in order to analyse that data. So it can actually take researchers many months, if not years. At the end of the day, researchers just want to get on with answering research questions and coming out with novel insights. They don't want to be spending time writing data governance applications. the HDR UK gateway will completely transform the way in which people can find data that's out there. Whereas 5 years ago, it was sort of a novel idea. I think people are kind of streamlining the process of actually linking data sets and providing subsets at scale in a reproducible way. And I think the landscape's very much changed with COVID in that people understand the power of data to inform public health decisions, and also the priority of getting timely access to data in order to carry out research. And so actually a positive outcome from COVID is hopefully that those processes will be streamlined, new architectures will be put in place, which still protect patient confidentiality and trust, but also enable much more timely access to data for other diseases other than COVID.
So I'm really pleased that worked. Last time I gave a similar talk, I didn't have any sound, so very pleased. Minor apologies, as the video is slightly out of date because Emily Jefferson is no longer the director of the Health Informatics Centre in Dundee, because she's now the Chief Technology Officer at HDR UK as of a couple of weeks ago. So we must do our best to try and get that updated. Okay, so the Health Data Research Innovation Gateway is a platform or search portal to discover and request access to UK health data sets for research and innovation. It was created because the UK is home to some of the richest health data and information in the world, but it's held across lots of different organisations, so it can be really difficult for researchers and other healthcare professionals to find out what data sets actually exist and how they might be helpful for their research. And this really is where the gateway comes in. So to help make health data sets in the UK that are available for use in research more discoverable to data scientists, researchers, clinicians, and other healthcare professionals that may find them useful for the work that they are carrying out. A few sort of key things to remember, to take away. The gateway doesn't hold or store any data sets, patient data or health information, but instead lists information about each data set. So the data set's metadata, it's essentially a metadata catalog of the data sets. The gateway doesn't just hold information on data sets. There are other resources on the platform as well. This includes tools, academic papers, a data use register, for example. The gateway is a public resource, so anyone can come along and Google the site and come along and have a search. But to request access to a data set and make use of some of the other features on the gateway, you need to create an account on the gateway first. One more thing to mention, the gateway is delivered in partnership with the UK Health Data Research Alliance, and this is a network of organisations that come together to establish best practice and standards in the ethical use of health data for research at scale. Most of the data sets that are currently listed on the gateway, or data set descriptions that are currently listed on the gateway, come from members of the alliance. So busy slide, but I'd like to give a very quick snapshot of where we are with the gateway since it launched in early 2020. So we're very close to reaching 800 data sets, or data set descriptions listed on the gateway. We've got about 3,000 other resources available on the gateway, and as I said before, that includes things like tools, data uses, published papers. We've got approximately 2,500 registered users from across the health data research community. So what I want to kind of show with this slide is really the timeline highlights the development and progress of the gateway since launch, which coincided with the COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020. And of course, as an organisation, we were heavily involved with the UK's response to the pandemic, making sure that there was focus on research efforts to accelerate fast-track access to the data assets that were required to answer priority research questions. And of course, this included the gateway, and its development very rapidly pivoted to support a lot of this work by helping to quickly onboard datasets that were identified as priority datasets and streamlining access to them through trusted research environments. So a lot of this rapid development is a sort of direct result of the pandemic, really. But now our goal is to very much scale beyond the pandemic and really apply our knowledge and what we've learned from the last few years to other national priority health areas like cancer, like heart disease, like mental health. So that's a bit of background and history about the gateway. So moving on to how you might search or find a data set on the gateway that you might be interested in using for your research. So I'm going to go through two ways to do this. The first is through a keyword and filter search, and the second is via a more curated approach. So first up, keyword and filter search. So here you can see that I've searched, used the search box at the top and typed in cancer for my initial search. I've then used one of the filters that are displayed on the left-hand side of the screen under publisher. Publisher, in this case, meaning the data custodian or keeper of the data. And I've filtered for two publishers, NHS Digital and DataCan. You can also see on the other side of the screen, on the right-hand side, the sorted by is metadata last updated, and this is the default setting, but there are other options in there in the drop-down menu. So all of those different filters and my search term has narrowed my initial keyword search from 96 data sets. If I just typed in cancer and hit search, that's how many would appear on the results page. And my two filters that I'm interested in looking at data sets from NHS Digital and DataCan has narrowed this down to 9 data sets. I can also save this search if I want to. At the top of the page, there's a save button. If you click on that, that opens a separate modal, and you can type a title for your search and come back to it later. And just to note as well that I can't put them on my screenshot, but on the filters on the left-hand side, there are a number of other ones that come below publisher. So you can use other filters, but just as a concept or example, I can only highlight the top one, but there are others that you can filter with too. So if I then click on, and the dataset lists further down the page as well, if I click on one of those and expand it, this is what you can see. So basically much more information about the data set. And I've clicked on the cancer registration data from NHS Digital. And it basically, it's all of the metadata that the data custodian, in this case, NHS Digital, has entered about the data set when they added it or onboarded it to the gateway. So that's what you would see if you clicked on one of the dataset cards from your initial search. So that's the first one, search with a term, a keyword term, and the filters. The next one that the next search option I'd like to talk through is collections. So collections are basically curated lists of gateway resources. So this is including data sets, but also things like tools, data uses, published papers again. So here are some of the cancer-related collections on the gateway. There are more. We actually have a collection of cancer collections, which you can access via the top link there below. If I click on one of those cards, you'll be able to see what it looks like inside a collection. So you can see at the bottom there, all of the resources are listed, and it looks very much like the dataset search page that I showed you previously. There's also an editable introduction text box at the top, and you can't quite see because I couldn't fit it on the page, but there's also an image at the top of the page as well. So this is actually DataCam collection on the gateway, and anyone with a gateway account can create a collection. So if you'd prefer to create a collection of data sets that you're interested in, you can save that and either keep it as a private collection, or you can share it publicly if you were basing your collections around a particular theme, for example. I think I said before, but there are a couple of links at the bottom, so you can have a look at all of the current cancer collections on the gateway, and then the DataCan collection as well. Okay, so that's finding a data set on the gateway. I'm now going to focus on data access for the next couple of slides, and how we're supporting that process. One of our main objectives with the gateway is to help simplify or streamline the data access request process for both data applicants and data custodians, so that we can facilitate a faster and smoother access to health data for research. So I said before that we're nearly at 800 data sets or data set descriptions currently listed on the gateway, and all of these can be inquired about in terms of gaining access to them. And I'm going to show you what that looks like now, as if you were inquiring about a particular data set that you were interested in for your research. So say you found a data set that you're interested in. I've got one here from Public Health Scotland, Scottish Cancer Registry. You can click on the How to Access button on the right-hand side of the screen to begin an inquiry about data access. So if I do that, this window pops up, and you can see it either invites you to make an inquiry or start an application. Now, all data sets on the gateway have a simple make an inquiry form that looks like this. Basically, it's a messaging service that puts you in direct contact with the data custodian. So you can ask a quick question about the data set, or you could ask something about the data access process before you begin an application, for example, like an email. But some data sets on the gateway, not all of them, some of them, you can apply to access them directly within the gateway platform itself by completing and submitting our 5-stage data access request application form. So this means that the entire application is managed through the gateway, and this is what that form looks like. So it's split into different sections, and you basically go through each one before submitting your application. Next slide. So this flowdown basically summarized what I talked about in my previous slide. There are 2 routes to requesting access to datasets listed on the gateway. via the simple inquiry form or through the platform itself using our 5safe data access request form. All datasets have the simple inquiry form enabled, so you can reach out to the data custodian, but only some have the in-platform option, the 5safes form, enabled through the gateway. And it depends on whether or not the data custodian has adopted our 5safes form or not. Those that have so far are listed on the left of this slide. Hopefully you can see them all, but they're quite low, the bottom ones. And this equates to about 140 data sets currently listed on the gateway. And actually most of these data sets are part of the data and connectivity programme, which is part of the National Core Studies programme set up to help the UK's research response to COVID. So a couple more things to say about data access and 5safes. So we developed the 5safe form with the help of Alliance members. And basically the idea is to provide a simpler, a more common approach to the data access management based around the ONS 5safes framework, which is the five people, the safe people, safe projects, safe settings, safe data, safe output principles. And if you're interested in learning more about those, there's a link here, and there's also a link at the end of my talk as well. So this is an iterative process. We're continuing to enhance it and simplify the form best as we can. We're currently working to make it more customizable as well, to benefit both the data custodian and the data applicant, and really continue to make the process and application to request access to health data sets more harmonized and easier for everybody, really. I think that's my last couple of slides. Yep. So just a few things to summarize who we are, a few things about the Gateway, the Alliance, what I've talked about with search based on the collections, and a bit more about the Gateway 5safes form. And then just a note on the bottom, I haven't really talked about this very much, but a quick sort of note to say that our future vision is really still to unite data through developing and delivering fair research data infrastructure services. And I heard this in a recent talk, and I'm going to steal it for this. So the FAIR principles, if you're not familiar with them, are, I'm testing myself now, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reproducible. And I think as a community, we're getting pretty good at the F and the A, the findable and the accessible. And so the next focus is really on the interoperable and reproducible element of developing infrastructure and services to better improve access to health data for research. And really that's, I think Mark or Geoff mentioned it before, it's the federated approach to access and analytics that's going to be key for that. A couple more slides before I hand over to Rosie. I think I'm actually slightly over time, my apologies. This is basically all of the data sets collections that I've mentioned in the slide, links to them. You can go and have a look at yourself. And then just a few things about how to learn more about the Gateway. So one of the things you can do very simply is Google it, go and have a search and a play yourself. You can also create an account on the Gateway and set yourself up with a Gateway profile. We have a monthly Gateway newsletter where we update on developments. We bring in opportunities to give feedback sessions, the latest news, any events. They all get announced in our monthly newsletter, so you can sign up there. These are, I will also share these links afterwards as well. We have a regular bi-monthly data access and discovery webinar, which is hosted by the Gateway team, but really focusing on lots of themes within the ecosystem of health data research. And finally, you can get in touch with me if you have any questions that either come up after the webinar or later down the line. Just to say thanks, and that's it for me, and apologies, I think I've run over slightly, Hannah, sorry.
No worries, you're fine. No, thank you, Ruth. It's been great to hear lots more about the Gateway, and I'm sure our ECRs will be utilising this going forwards. That's great. So I would now like to hand over to Rosie, who's going to talk a little bit about HDR Futures.
Thanks, Hannah. Hi, everyone. So my name is Rosie Wakeham, and I'm going to talk to you for the next 5 or 10 minutes about HDR UK Futures. Now, let me just share my screen quickly and get going. Okay, so I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you all about HDR UK Futures. It's a free and flexible online learning platform, and I would like to tell you about how Futures can support you in your health data science career, both now and in the future. So a very quick slide to start off on the challenge. The demand for skilled data scientists has never been higher, with some key reports coming out recently highlighting this demand and pointing to availability of robust continuing professional development and training as a key need for the UK data science workforce. So what are HDR UK doing to help address this challenge? We have several programs, including our online learning environment, HDR UK Futures, which I'm going to talk to you about in detail today. But as well as HDR UK Futures, our PhD and master's programs offer a strong foundation into the career of health data science, and we support apprenticeships which offer alternative routes into the field. Our internship programs, the Black Internship Programme and Biomedical Vocation Scholarship, help to address underrepresentation in health data science. So on to Futures. Futures is completely free to sign up and houses a growing library of CPD accredited bite-sized videos, with tutors spanning NHS, academia, industry, charities, and all working at the forefront of health data science. Futures allows you to learn in your own time. You can create playlists of bite-sized videos, earn badges and certificates to mark your progress, and also see what's going on with training and events in HDR UK's community. So we've designed the platform to be intuitive and have personalised features to enable you to get the most out of it. A personalised welcome page allows you to immediately see your progress and completed hours for your CPD record. You can see what video playlists are available to follow, and you can also create your own. You can search for training based on your interests and learning needs. You can join communities and be recommended training based on your previous activity and based on what's most popular on the platform. So in addition to bite-sized videos, we also have some more training available. We run live workshops and webinars. We profile different careers in health data science on our website, and you can also find out who our subject matter experts are. Coming soon, our online self-directed courses to complete on the Futures platform, a career event in summer 2023, and a training portal. So the beauty of the training portal is that the landscape of organisations offering health data science training is getting busier all the time. So our training portal is designed to simplify this for you and allow users to search through a directory of training courses offered by HDR UK, its partners, and also external organisations in the UK and abroad. You can apply filters based on your interests or individual learning needs and be directed out via a link to the respective website where you can find out more and start the training. So it's all designed to simplify and speed up the search for training and help practicing and aspiring health data scientists find the specific training that suits them and their individual learning needs. And this is just a screenshot of one of our recent workshops in health information engineering, which was a live interactive multi-day workshop. And we're going to be running that again in early 2023. So a really quick slide on who our training partners are. We harness the expertise of a large range of partners to ensure we're assessing the ever-evolving needs of the health data science community and keep informed of what training is going on in the sector. So our training partners span NHS, university and HDR UK regional network, industry and health charities, and nationally and internationally. So I'm going to grab a few moments of your time to do a quick poll, but on the screen at the moment is a QR code which you can scan to sign up for Futures. There's a still of one of our bite-sized videos there, which was an introduction to code-free deep learning. And if you'll permit me, I'm just going to switch screens to the poll. And while the poll's going ahead and afterwards, I'm also going to put some more links into the chat so you can sign up to our newsletter to stay informed on what's going on, what training the team is putting out there, and also to follow us on LinkedIn as well. So bear with me while I just switch screens. Hopefully it will be very smooth. Okay, so hopefully you can now see a QR code. So if you go ahead and scan that, I will start the poll. This is just to help us kind of streamline our Futures messaging and make sure that we're pitching it right. Okay, so here's the first question, which is what methods of communication would be best to increase your awareness of engagement with HDR Futures in the future. Thanks everyone who's completing the poll. This is really, really helpful for us, so I appreciate it. Okay, looks like the entries have slowed, so I'm just going to transition to the next question, which is which of the following messages do you connect with the most regarding HDR UK Futures? Give you a moment to read them all. Amazing, thank you. Cool. Okay, thanks everyone. Looks like they're slowing down as well. So I'll just stop the poll and stop sharing. And thanks everyone for listening. I will pop some links into the chat and also my email address. So if you have any questions at all about any of the training, CPD or educational programs at HDR UK, feel free to drop me a message. Thanks.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Rosie. So now we have time for some questions. If there's anything you would like to ask Ruth or Rosie in relation to anything you've just heard, please do pop them in the chat. I believe Douglas is going to have a look at these as they come in. So please do pop in any thoughts that you might have. I can see that I believe Ruth just shared her email address in the chat that you should all have access to, I hope. So you'll be able to contact her if there's anything else. And just a quick side note as well, all the slides from today will be shared. So any of those links and bits and pieces within the slides, you'll be able to access at a later date as well. Just give everybody a moment.
Well, thanks very much to Rosie and Ruth. That was great talks, and it's a fantastic resource, and I can certainly think of several things that I can, questions I can answer using the HDR Gateway. I just had one quick question about those studies that have the 5 SAFEs form kind of application process. Do you need to have had ethical approval for your project prior to requesting access, or is that part of the process of, like, is it reviewed by an ethics committee as part of the process?
Now, that is a very good question and somewhat beyond my expertise. However, what I would say is that it will depend on those, the forms are related to the data set that you're requesting access to and the data custodian that houses it or manages it. So it's very much dependent on that and the nature of the study or the project. But that information is provided as part of the 5 SAFEs form. So as you work your way through it, that would probably come under the SAFE project section. There's 5 different sections on the gateway form. There will be a section in there about ethics and approval and governance and things like that, that there'll be information that you can follow to fill in the form to the best of your knowledge. A bit like what Michael said in his talk, where follow the instruction and the guidance that comes alongside the form as best as you can to complete it before submission. I don't think that's really answered your question, but it's very dependent on the data set itself, the project, and the data custodian.
Fair enough, but good to hear that the information is
Yeah.
kind of collated, so it's easier to know how long. Because I saw that it had the kind of estimated access time for the data, so it's useful to know when you're planning your projects what you need in advance and how long it's going to take. The other question I had while we're waiting for a few to come through on the chat is there a particular process for getting your data sets that we may have curated added to the gateway? How do we go about that?
Yeah, another really good question. So I briefly mentioned before that we deliver the gateway in partnership with the UK Health Data Research Alliance, and most of the data sets that are currently listed on the gateway come from members of the Alliance. So the very first thing to do is to have a look to see if your organisation is a member of the Alliance. And I definitely shared a link to the Alliance in my slide, but I will follow up with the specific members. That's the very first step in that process, and then we basically go from there. Not all of the data sets on the gateway come from Alliance members, so we've got we very cleverly named ones that are not from the Alliance under other, so there will be a way, but that's the first step, is to check if there's already a organisation or data custodian, really is what I should be saying, already listed on the gateway that you can host your data set underneath, if that makes sense.
Great, thanks very much. Maybe a question for Rosie. I saw that you'd have some PhD and masters funded through HDR. When do those applications go out, or when can people apply for those positions? This particular time of year that the call for those PhDs come out.
Yeah, sure. There is an application window. What I think I'll do is, there's a dedicated member of the team who looks after that. So instead of giving the wrong information, I'll pop her email address and the relevant web links into the chat so that you can find that out. And if your question, if you have any more questions about the PhD or the master's programs, feel free to email me and I'll make sure that the right member of the team gets back to you on that.
Great, thanks very much. Just to say, if to members, if you have a particular question, particularly for some of the last sessions panelists, then put it in the chat and we'll try and kind of collate the questions together and put it to the panelists after the session and get and send around kind of answers to that haven't been covered on the live chats. I'm just going to see whether there's any more. Oh, we've got questions coming through. One question again, Ruth, that you might not know the answer to. Do you have any idea about the who is accessing the gateway, and do you get many early career researchers accessing it, or is it more established researchers? Do you have any data on that from your users?
Oh, that's a very good question. I wonder if Steph is on the call, if she can hear me. If not, it doesn't matter so much, but we can follow up. In terms of the breakdown, sort of career stages, I don't know that information, but it's definitely something that I can get back to you on. But in terms of the registered users, about 50% of those are coming from an academic institution or background. Further detail than that at the moment, I'd have to go away and have a look for you.
I actually am on the call. Wait, sorry, can you repeat the question?
It was just to see whether you had any idea about who's using the gateway. Do you get a lot of people at the early career researchers essentially at the start of their career, or is it more established researchers that are kind of accessing and using the gateway?
So it's a bit of both, actually. We have quite a few initiatives at HDR UK where we work with early career researchers. So we have the Early Career Researcher Forum, and then things like our Black Internship Programme and our master's students are all really encouraged to kind of use it and see what's there and if it can help them with their research projects. But then definitely people who are kind of later on in their careers. And then I think quite a lot of people come through via the custodians. So researchers who are working directly with custodians who then have their data sets on the gateway. So it's a real mix. But what I will say is that we are developing the gateway always. It's a journey and it's definitely still in progress. So what we're really looking for is all the feedback that we can get, and we want to build something that works for researchers, whatever kind of stage they are in their research. And actually I think early career researchers are kind of the future, so almost more important. So if you do have feedback, or if there is areas of the gateway that you kind of think, oh, they'd be brilliant if it could do this, but it doesn't mean that it will never, like, definitely let us know, because that's what we want. We want to develop it so that it kind of fits your need exactly as you want it. So please do let us know. But yeah, we've got quite a few early career researchers. There's also some people from industry. We've got some patients in the public that come and have a look. So it's a real mix, but yeah, it is mostly researchers. But yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thanks.
Oh, Rosie. Oh,
I
sorry,
just wanted to jump in really quickly and echo what Steph has just said, but also with regards to health data research futures. So we really want the platform to be providing training that fits your needs. So we're adding videos to it all the time, but if you see anything on any elements of training that you would really like that aren't currently on there, do just reach out and ask for them, because we really want to hear from you and make sure that we're creating the training that's helpful to you. So yeah, just echo what Steph said. Thanks.
Thanks very much. So I think, unfortunately, we've coming to the end of the session, but for those whose questions are not answered yet, we'll follow that up after the session. And I'd just like to say if anyone on today's workshop, if you do start to use these resources and start to use the HDR UK gateway or even DataCan, then it'd be really nice to hear from you, because we're hoping to kind of continue supporting ECRs in data science over the next few years. So it'd be useful to know who's using it and to be able to share that knowledge with the rest of our members. But just like to say thank you to the panelists from this session and the earlier session, and I'll just hand back to Hannah to close. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks very much, Douglas. Yeah, so there we go. We have reached the end of our session this morning. So just like to echo Doug's thank yous. Thank you very much to all of our speakers. And of course, Amit and Doug, who have also been working through your questions. Thank you also to the team at HDR UK, Steph and Vrinda, who've been working hard to make sure everything runs smoothly for you all today. So just before we leave you, we'd like to revisit the poll that we had earlier. So it should have, there we go, it just popped up on your screen now. So if you can just take a moment to complete that for us, that'd be brilliant. I'll give everybody a second. And just to know, a more detailed feedback form will be reaching you shortly. So we'd be grateful if you could complete that for us so we can hear your thoughts. I'll just give everybody a couple more minutes to look at that poll. Okie dokie, right. I think we are likely all there. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to read those questions and pop their answers in. So just one more big thank you to everybody for attending today. I really hope that you found today's session to be useful. And it is very nearly 12 o'clock, so I will leave it there and wish you all a good rest of your day and rest of your week. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.